Hello, and welcome to our Coping with Stress and Depression webinar. I'm Susan Weinstein, Co-Executive Director at Families for Depression Awareness. During this webinar, you'll hear strategies for managing your own stress, discussion of workplace issues, and information about anxiety and depression. If you're with us now for the live webinar, please submit your questions anytime during the program. We expect that this webinar will last between 60 and 75 minutes, including the questions and answers that will come at the end. Thank you so much to all of those who provided responses on the registration form about what you want to learn and what you would want to ask. Even though I know we'll be providing information that responds to many of your concerns, there are definitely more issues than we can cover in just this webinar. I hope that you will continue to let us know of your interests so that we can find ways to bring that information to you. I would also like to direct you to two resources that will address some of the issues that you have raised. The first is the Families for Depression Awareness website, familyaware.org, where you will want to click on the Help Someone section. The other is our mental health advocacy blog, which is at careforyourmind.org. There, click on the Workplace Issues category, and you'll find more than 20 articles about topics like why companies should support employees' mental health, how to take medical leave or get workplace accommodations, why work is important in mental health treatment, and more. Before we get immersed, I'll comment on the scope of this program. If you are only interested in teen depression, please go back to our website and watch the fabulous webinar we had this fall with Dr. Amy Salzman. We also have webinars that are specifically about the cognitive symptoms of depression and about adult bipolar disorder. So please watch those recorded webinars on our website at familyaware.org/trainings. In addition, as we mentioned on the website, our webinars are intended for parents, employers, employees, spouses, human resources, and employee assistance program professionals, and a general adult audience. If you are a mental health care clinician, please feel free to watch and consider it as a resource for your clients, but be advised that we are not providing professional continuing education. Okay. You can click on the link in the materials section to download a handout of the slides we'll be going through today. After the webinar, please give us your feedback on our online survey. You should arrive at the survey page after the webinar, but the link is also available on the educational webinars page of our website, again, familyaware.org/trainings. You'll help us improve our program, and we'll thank you with a free copy of our Coping with Stress brochure. If you're watching in a group, as several of you are, we'd appreciate each person filling out a survey, and we'll send you all the brochure as well. If you find that this webinar is helpful to you, please forward the link to your friends and colleagues. The recorded webinar will be available for viewing on our website. Finally, we hope that you will help us reach, educate, and support more people by making a tax-deductible contribution to Families for Depression Awareness. I'm sure there are many, many demands in your life, so we greatly appreciate you spending your precious time with us to learn about how you might be able to better manage your stress and to know when and how to seek professional help for yourself, a loved one, a friend, or a colleague. So today in this webinar, this is our agenda. Our expert will cover how stress affects us as individuals, family members, and workers, describe many ways to manage stress, lead us through a mindfulness exercise, discuss how you can know when the issue might be more than stress, talk about anxiety and depression, and provide information about how to get help for yourself or someone you are concerned about. Then I'll jump back in and familiarize you with Families for Depression Awareness. After that, we'll get to your questions, then wrap up and send you off to complete the survey. I am so pleased to introduce Marianne Clyde, an expert in workplace mental health. She has practiced as a licensed marriage and family therapist for more than 27 years and has published 3 best-selling books: Peaceful Parenting, 10 Essential Principles, Unleashed, Practical Steps to Get Your Life Unstuck, and her newest, Zentivity, How to Eliminate Chaos, Stress, and Discontent in Your Workplace. Ms. Clyde has written and published numerous articles and has appeared on radio and television worldwide, commenting on topics ranging from gun violence to having a happy marriage. She has been the host and/or producer of her own TV shows, a call-in radio show, and a CD, Moments of Mindfulness Meditation. Ms. Clyde is both the founder of the Marianne Clyde Center for Holistic Psychotherapy in Warrenton, Virginia, and the founder of the Be the Change Foundation, which works to empower and equip women to build successful home-based businesses. She is a sought-after and energetic speaker on topics such as empowerment, team building, and relationship networking. Last but not least, Ms. Clyde has spent time in at least 20 developing countries, teaching about recovery from trauma, personal empowerment, and interpersonal relationships. Marianne, thank you so much for being here.
At this
Susan,
point, thank you.
Let me turn the program over to you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm excited today. I mean, talking about stress, who doesn't have it? You know, and stress is our body's way of responding to any kind of demand placed on us. But keep in mind as we're talking that stress also refers to happy events like weddings and births of babies and birthday parties and fun things, as well as divorce and losing a job and moving to a new vocation. So we have, whether it's what you call good stress or bad stress, everything we experience really can add stress to our lives. Many of us spend more time of our waking time at work than we do at home, and so our workplace can have a profound effect on our well-being. You're nearly certain to have negative consequences if you work in a high-stress environment without support from your team. While employers do have a responsibility to create a positive workplace culture, it's you that needs to learn to manage your stress. So it's up to us to figure out how we can make this work for ourselves. There are so many different things that can trigger a stress response through our workplaces. You know, you can look at the slide and just which one creates the most stress for you. Is it the long hours, or is it inadequate pay? Is your work boring, or are there relationship difficulties? They seem to follow us everywhere, don't they? But the question I have for you is, what does stress really just feel like for you? Imagine that this is happening to you. You're driving on a quiet road, you're singing to the radio, and you come out of a curve, you see a dog sitting on the side of the road looking like it might dart into your path. So you slam on the brakes and you swerve your car. How does that feel? What is happening in your body during and immediately after that stressful event? I know for me, I feel like my heart starts pounding and I feel this heaviness in my chest, and my senses are heightened, my hands get clenched, and I feel this tension all the way through my body. It's important for us each to know physically how stress triggers us. And then, when the dog moves, gets out of the way, then my body goes back to normal, and I'm feeling relaxed again. So the sensations you experience when you encounter a dog in the road are much the same as when you deal with stress that happens in the workplace or at home. Stress has a variety of symptoms. You're probably familiar with many of them. So if you just look at the slide and you can see which ones affect you the most. Is it digestive problems, like heartburn? Or do you find yourself restless and fidgeting? Do you find yourself getting sick more frequently or irritable? Forgetful, problems concentrating? Do you lose your interest in things that were fun for you at one time, like getting together with your friends or even sex? You can lose your interest in things when you're stressed. These symptoms can be managed. But we need to know what's happening in our bodies to cause these symptoms. Well, fear, as well as anger and excitement, can trigger the fight, flight, or freeze response that impacts the body in a number of ways. When breaking for a dog, that instinctive reaction is helpful. Some stress warns you about things to come, and you make motions to keep yourself safe. But when stress is unrelenting, when it's chronic, If you're juggling financial concerns and a chronic medical condition with your work and your family life, it can really cause your bodies to go into overwhelm. With the brain, powerful chemicals are being released throughout your body, adrenaline and cortisol. And those things are purposeful and needed when you need to fight or flee. But long term, those chemicals can harm your bodies in a number of ways. And the next slide is going to show us what can happen if we stay in a state of chronic stress with those hormones and chemicals having no place to go. We can absolutely get more susceptible to disease, whether it's just a common cold, or we can become more susceptible to cancer, to heart disease, to diabetes. We can have trouble sleeping. Look at this scale and see what it is that you tend to experience when you're under chronic stress. There's a test you can take online called the Holmes-Ray Stress Scale, and it gives a quantifying amount of stress to every event, whether it's a divorce or a marriage or a job change or the birth of a child. And you'll see if you've got a lot of those things going on at one time, you rate pretty high on the stress scale. So you can see the link there in the slide. So I recommend after the seminar, when you get a chance, go ahead and click on that and see how your stress might be impacting your health. All right, so we have to figure out how to cope with all this stress. Do you usually cope with stress in healthy ways or unhealthy ways? That pizza sure looks good, doesn't it? And a lot of times what we do is we'll reach out for something unhealthy, the pizza, the donut, the extra drink. You might light up a cigarette or even take illegal drugs. These are unhealthy ways to deal with stress because the unhealthiness of it only exacerbates the problem. So let's talk about a few ways that you can choose a healthy response. You know, Viktor Frankl, who is the author of Man's Search for Meaning, says in that book, between stimulus and response, there is space. And in that space lies your freedom to choose your response. And therein lies your freedom. You can choose in that split second before you reach for that pizza, before you reach for that third martini, before you reach for that cigarette. You can choose an alternative. My favorite, my go-to stress relief is just breathe. It's principle 4 in my book Zentivity. It's tattooed on my wrist so I don't forget, because breathing does an awful lot of good things. It makes you stop. It makes you think. You know, when you're in fight or flight mode, all the oxygen, the adrenaline, all that stuff goes to your extremities so you can fight or flee. But the oxygen actually leaves your brain so you don't think quite so clearly. So very important in any kind of a stressful situation is to take a deep breath, hold it for a few seconds, and let it circulate around your body as it should, and it helps your body relax. It also, when you breathe out through your mouth, you're releasing toxins. And so that's an easy, free go-to that you can do in the middle of a board meeting. You can do if you're being reprimanded by your boss. You can do that if a coworker is being rude and kind of trying to strike up a conversation while you're trying to get through work. You can just breathe. But then again, there's other ways to reduce stress, and they are creating new ways of life. You can laugh and sing, you can practice spirituality, but one that I really particularly like is practicing gratitude. That is also principle number 6 in my book. It's so important that the practice of gratitude can change your brain just like the practice of meditation can change your brain. And we all know what it's like to feel grateful, but practicing gratitude is something that can't be casually tossed off. It's a mindful process, and it takes conscientious thinking. You can choose when something is going wrong to look for something to be grateful for in the midst of that problem. But you can prepare yourself by creating a grateful lifestyle. I like to think of 3 things before I get out of bed in the morning that I'm grateful for, and 3 things before I go to bed at night. Other people have told me that they'll choose a time of day. Maybe when they get to their desk at their office, they'll sit down, take a deep breath, and think of the things they want to be grateful for. Or if that doesn't work for you, whatever time of day works for you, choose a time and think of what you're grateful for. And it's really important to think of different things every day and stretch your mind, because how often are you grateful for the clocks in your office? How often do you think to be thankful for toilet paper or paper towels or carpet or the chair that you're sitting in? Be creative and begin to change your way of thinking, that you're creating a lifestyle of gratitude. And some people even keep a gratitude journal. Well, they'll just jot down a few things they're grateful for every day. Another way to reduce stress, of course, is to reprogram your thinking, because we might think it's all these outside stressors that are causing us all this anguish, but in fact, it's what we're thinking about those stressors. It's how you're thinking about your boss. It's how you're thinking about your family or your mother-in-law or the deadline that's looming or the amount of money that you make. Negative or distorted thinking can make a bad situation worse. And so really important, in case you're thinking, I'm always late for work, just focus on the one time that I was on time today. That matters. You can evaluate and examine your interpretations, and once you do that, you'll find that you're empowering yourself to make a choice. And when you can make a choice, which you always can, you're no longer a victim. Finding the good within you, too, is also very, very important. Not just the good in others, but it's important to recognize and respect what is good about you. Take a second and think, what do you like about you? Are you a good athlete? Are you good with people? Are you a hard worker? Are you good at communication? Things I like about myself. I'm a loving and involved parent and grandparent. I think I'm an even-handed therapist, being able to look at many sides. It's not conceited to look at your strengths. It's actually an important way to begin to be able to respect and admire other people genuinely if you can respect and admire yourself. So let's take a look at other ways we can practice stress reduction. There is mindfulness-based stress reduction. It's a variety of practices that you can create a lifestyle. It's not just a one-off thing. It's how you use these things like meditation and yoga to create a lifestyle of being present in this very moment. You know, you can even, if you're the one stuck at the end of the day washing everybody's coffee cups that they left in the kitchen sink at the office, rather than be angry about it, just use that time to pay attention to the feel of the water, the bubbles in the cups, the towels that you're using to dry off the cups. Listen to what you're hearing in the background and begin to immerse yourself in that moment. Smell it. Smell the soap. What do you smell? And then put it away, and you'll find yourself much more relaxed than you would if you banged your way through it and were annoyed the whole time. Always focus on your senses. It helps you just be in the experience. When you learn to embrace the experience, you can enjoy and relax and not resist. Now think about this for a while. If you take a deep breath in, what do you feel around your nostrils? You can feel the cool air going into your nostrils. You can feel your lungs expanding and your chest getting larger. And then when you blow out through your mouth, how does the air feel when your mouth is drying out with the air through it? Your chest is deflating. Just pay attention to breathe in and breathe out. And any moment that you're under stress, you can take a moment, breath by breath, to calm yourself down. And if you'd allow me, I'd like to take a moment just to lead you through one particular mindfulness exercise so that you can learn how to do it yourself. You can do a mindfulness exercise sitting right there at your desk, whether you've got an office or you've got a cubicle. You can do this at home. Just find a little quiet space. And right now, let me ask you just to close your eyes and take in a deep breath. Breathe in. Breathe out. One more time. Breathe in. And breathe out. One more time. Breathe in. Breathe out. Now picture yourself while you continue that slow breathing. You're at the beach. It's a warm, sunny day. You're sitting on a little chair that's low to the sand and just on the edge of the water. You can feel the water come in slowly and trickle over your toes, and then the tide recedes. Again, the water comes in, covers over your toes. Feel the sand kind of be pulled away from your feet as the water is receding. And while that's happening, at the same time, you feel the warm sun on your face. It's not hot. It's pleasantly warm. It feels happy. It feels like a hug. And there's a gentle, cool breeze that gently blows your hair while the sun's shining, so you're not too hot, you're not too cold. The water comes in, the water goes out. Now listen. Above, you can hear the gulls. You can hear them talking to one another as they glide over the ocean. Wings are extended and they're floating gently over the sea, looking for their lunch. They're totally focused and yet relaxed at the same time. And take a deep breath and smell the salty air. The ocean smell like to you? What other smells can you smell at the ocean? Maybe a hot dog stand close by. Immerse yourself in this and realize that when the water comes in, it's always going to go back away. Just like the stress, it's going to come. Just like the receding waves, always goes back into the big ocean. So any stresses you feel, let them wash back out to the ocean with every wave recedes. Joy knowing that you are whole, perfect, complete, nothing. You breathe in and you breathe out. Breathe in, out. As you open your eyes, you can take another deep breath. Breathe out. How does that feel? You can do this any way you want. You can picture yourself walking through the woods. You can picture yourself sitting on the front porch. You can picture yourself on a 40-foot apartment building overlooking Tokyo Bay. You can picture yourself climbing Machu Picchu. Whatever you want to do, just immerse yourself in that whole experience for just a few minutes using all 5 of your senses. What do you see? What do you feel? What do you smell? And just allow yourself to relax into that moment. And, you know, that's one good way of taking care of yourself, and so is practicing gratitude, another way of taking care of yourself. But an easy one that sometimes we don't think about is to create the sounds and the way that you want your day to start. You know, if your phone is the way you wake up in the morning and you can set your own ringer on your phone, why not set chimes or gentle bells or even water flowing or trickling in a brook so that you're awakening to something that's relaxing, even a little mindfulness meditation that can run on your phone. And then, of course, we always run for our first cup of coffee first thing, but you might want to consider while your coffee's brewing or your tea is brewing, take a glass of water. You can even squirt in a little bit of lemon, and that will alkalinize your body while you're waiting for your first cup of coffee. And water is just as important to the body as air. So as you breathe and you release toxins as you breathe out, same thing happens when you drink plenty of water. The toxins are released as you urinate. So it's really important to hydrate as much as you can. And then maybe take that cup of tea or coffee and go outside and listen to the sounds of nature and enjoy the fresh air. And realize that you have a choice how your day starts. It doesn't have to be crazy all the time. Because then here you show up at your office and you got to go right to work. But you know, that too is up to you. Much of it has to do with you set the stage for yourself. You can develop and maintain work habits that reflect elements of self-care and give priority to you and your well-being. One thing I do about once a week is I will call a friend, a supportive friend that's easy to be with, who doesn't raise any stress in me, and just we affirm each other. We go out to lunch about once a week or have coffee, whatever we have time for. But you choose the people that you are positive that you want to hang out with. And I know sometimes at work it's not very easy to set boundaries. I know sometimes maybe there's a person that's hanging out right at your doorway and wants to chat, and they seem to have all the time in the world, and you've got a deadline and you're trying to work and they don't seem to get it. You know, it's totally appropriate for you to say, hey, I would love to chat with you, but I have to get this project finished. How about if we meet at lunch? Or how about if we meet at a coffee break at 3 o'clock and spend a couple minutes together? That way you're taking charge of yourself and you're not being rude or blowing people off. Sometimes the boss requires you to work overtime, but other times you have a choice to say, hey, I have to pick up my kids at 5 o'clock and I can't be late. And so you have to be okay with that. And you have to be able to say, this is what I have to do. And I'm a big proponent of taking a mental health day once in a while. If you feel like you're too stressed at work and you need some time, maybe you're having trouble balancing home life and work life and stress is just getting to you, you would take a sick day in a heartbeat if you were sick. So why not take a mental health day and respect yourself enough to know that it's time to take care of yourself? And I know this is a whole lot of ideas, and I'm shooting out a whole bunch of different things, but what I want to say how important it is within 24 hours of any time you go to a conference, you listen to a webinar like this, we can get our minds so full of things that it's so important to say, I'm going to do this one thing as soon as I get off the webinar. Within 24 hours, I'm going to make this commitment to start something, whether it's a meditation practice or learning to just breathe or learning to take a little walk around the house before you reach for that second drink or that second piece of pizza. Take a moment just to jot down on a piece of paper, what is the one thing you're going to commit to and when you're going to do it to help you reduce your stress. Remember, you are the one in charge of your life, because stress is one thing. We all have it. But if we don't learn to manage it effectively, it can overwhelm us. You probably know somebody with anxiety or depression. And the bad news is anxiety and depression are all too common. But the good news is they are physical, biological, treatable medical conditions. And anxiety disorders and depression don't discriminate. They can affect anyone, rich or poor, tall or thin. They can, any sociological group, any race, any nationality. It's not, stress and depression and anxiety don't just pick one particular type of person. And very often these things can run in families, and they're biologically related. So just know that an anxiety disorder is marked by excessive dread, fear, or worry. And it's more intense, and it lasts longer than that passing feeling of stress, like we felt like when we were braking so we didn't hit that dog that might run in the street. Anxiety is not necessarily tied to particular events that can cause nervousness or discomfort to many people, but rather clinical anxiety is constant, it causes social withdrawal, and it clearly interferes with all aspects of your daily life. Do you know that some 40 million adult Americans suffer from anxiety disorders? Anxiety poses a real challenge because while mental health clinicians may treat symptoms, the actual anxiety disorder causing the symptoms often go unrecognized. And we have to get to the source if we're going to actually get rid of the anxiety. That means that many people with anxiety suffer because their condition hasn't been properly diagnosed. So here you go. There are a number of symptoms associated with anxiety. Look over the list for a moment and see if any of them resemble things that you experience. Too much sleep? Too little sleep? You find yourself avoiding activities or people? You have irrational fears? Pick out the ones that might be bothering you. And then understand that anxiety and depression often have similar symptoms. And depression is deeper and more intense than just feeling the blues. We all feel the blues sometimes. But depression is a common medical disorder, and recognizing depression for what it is and appropriately treating it can be a matter of life or death. So I don't want you to take this lightly. When it's unrecognized and or untreated, depression can lead to suicide. 30% of those with depression might attempt suicide, and 50% of those that attempt succeed. So it's very, very important that there are many signs of depression, and you need to recognize it and ask for help. Knowing the symptoms makes it possible to to not only be aware of our own depressed moods, but to observe a family member or a coworker who might also be depressed. The signs and symptoms of anxiety, like I mentioned, are similar. So if you know someone who's experiencing these signs, it's important to be evaluated, whether it's by a psychiatrist or a therapist or a psychologist or any other mental health practitioner. But the most important three signs, or the most common, are feeling miserable or irritable, losing interest in things, and thinking of suicide. And if you think someone might be considering suicide, it's important that you ask, are you thinking of hurting yourself? Or do you have thoughts of suicide? Many people hesitate to be that blunt or that direct because they're afraid they're going to put the idea into somebody's head. You're not going to put the idea into their head. If someone's feeling suicidal, the fact that somebody's recognizing that they might need help might bring them a glimmer of hope, and you can encourage them to seek help immediately. And here's some other signs. Yes, just like stress, sleep patterns are off, eating patterns are off, your energy levels are low, you feel guilty or worthless. And when I say feel guilty, I'm talking about that chronic feeling guilty over everything. Your ability to concentrate and make decisions is really difficult. You feel that foggy brain, feeling a lot of aches and pains. Recognize it and ask for help. So how can you tell if someone might be suffering from depression? Here's outward signs that you might notice in a coworker or a family member. Just look it over. Are they drinking more than usual? Are they withdrawing from people? Pay attention and say something. Hey, looks like you're feeling kind of down. Maybe we can talk and make a date to have lunch with them or coffee. If you or someone you know are feeling overwhelmed by stress or experiencing anxiety or depression, confidential help is available. You can call your doctor, just your regular primary care doctor, and if you'd rather see a therapist but you don't know who to call, you can ask them what therapist they recommend. The resources, you can call the 800 number on your health care plan and say, what therapists or psychiatrists or psychologists are in the area so that I can see them. And there's lots of resources available through the Families for Depression Awareness website, and that's familyaware.org. So make sure you check that out. You can have complete an online screening, and there's the link. Right, I just skipped right past it, but there you have the link if you want to take an online assessment so you can know. And then, because people who have clinical depression do feel hopeless and suffer deep emotional pain for extended periods, and because severe, prolonged depression can cause dysfunction in every aspect of your life, not just your relationships, but your work, your schooling, there are different treatment options, and talk therapy very often is sufficient in itself. Sometimes just talking about what's on your mind can cut your pain in half. But sometimes medication is important as an adjunct to that, so that you can it helps you get your footing sometimes, so that you can actually follow the recommendations of the therapist or do some of the things that you want to do that you've learned from this webinar. For most people, a combination approach from therapy and medication is most effective. But for harder to treat cases, there are other ways that you can get help, such as brain stimulation therapy and so forth. But it's very important at the same time to do what you can. Do the exercising, eating a proper diet, getting adequate sleep. That's vital. The important thing for you to keep in mind is that you do what you can do and then you ask for help when you need it. So, Susan, I think you've got some neat stuff to tell them about Families for Depression Awareness.
Well, none of it is as neat as what you've been talking about, but we do offer a bunch of resources on our website and through publications and such that I'm very happy to share the information. You brought up so many good points, and they tie in so nicely with questions that we've received that I will go through these the information about FFDA, and then we'll get back and ask probably many of these questions. I did want to remind people to hang tight and take the evaluation afterward so that we will send you the Coping with Stress brochure. And also, you'll help us by helping us improve our programs. So, Families for Depression Awareness is a national nonprofit organization that helps families recognize and cope with depression and bipolar disorder to get people well and prevent suicides. We do this through education, training, and support. We really like to give people actionable advice. We believe very strongly that depression and bipolar disorder affect the whole family. It could be that we're talking about biologically, where the kids may be inheriting a propensity toward depression, or, you know, it could be that if this fellow has depression, you know, it's wearing out the woman, it's, you know, probably disturbing the kids. So everybody needs to have the chance to recognize their own needs and get them addressed. Our website, which you have obviously visited, has a wealth of information that we have recently reorganized to make it easier for you to find things. So if you would like to give us feedback on that anytime, we would welcome it. As I mentioned earlier, the Help Someone tab has a lot of resources for you if you have concerns about someone else. And it also has a depression and bipolar screening tool so that you can get the results and print them out and take them to your doctor. One of the things that has characterized our organization as opposed to many others is that we were really out in front in terms of bringing real stories of real people dealing with mood disorders, depression and bipolar disorder, so that we could be putting a face on depression. We could be putting a face on bipolar disorder. And you know, one of the things that's most important for us is to deal with the stigma that's out there about mental health. And you do that, we think, best by having people tell their stories. So we have a number of personal stories and family stories on our website. We also have expert interviews from leading mental health clinicians, and they're available in a variety of formats. So we're also going to be putting up a couple of brand new videos, so check our social media feed for that. Along with this webinar that we're doing, we have other webinars that we have previously recorded and have available on our website. Those are currently the teen depression one that I spoke of earlier with Dr. Saltzman. We have a bipolar disorder webinar with a clinician and a person whose family has been affected by bipolar disorder. And we also have a webinar that's about the cognitive symptoms of depression, so that those are affecting your thinking, which we have developed a variety of materials that we put under the category of more than mood. A lot of people, when you say depression, they think of the symptoms as being, you know, the mood and thinking of suicide and other things. But as Marianne commented earlier, depression can also really affect your thinking. And we looked at the areas of thinking that can be recognized, and we came up with this acronym of ROAM. We call them the ROAM symptoms of depression because they affect reasoning, organization, attention, and memory. So there's a whole lot of information there. It's meant to inform you so that you can be aware and also advocate for yourself or for your loved one to receive care that really addresses all the symptoms of depression. I spoke earlier of our bipolar and depression test. We also have something that's very useful for determining about bipolar disorder because that runs very strongly in families. So that is the mental health family tree. And we also have a wellness analyzer, which allows you to set your own treatment goals and monitor progress toward them. And it's a good way of having more than just the last couple of days within your memory, being able to report that to your clinician. One of the things that we get a lot of impact out of is our teen depression program. We have a webinar that we offer twice a year. The one that was with Dr. Saltzman was this most recent one. We have a workshop that we're able to do in person in Massachusetts, but also we can create one and train you on how to present that program. We have wellness guides. One is for the parent, one is for the teen, and together they work on defining wellness and monitoring the approach as they move forward toward wellness. And then we also have teen speakers who are young people between the ages of 14 and 25 who have their own experiences with depression or bipolar disorder. Some of them also have experienced suicide loss. And we work with them to craft their stories, and we teach them about public speaking, and then they go out and speak in schools and boys and girls clubs and community centers throughout Massachusetts. So if you are in the area and you're interested, then by all means get in touch with us. We have publications. The one that is most recent is our adult bipolar disorder brochure, which is fabulous. So if you have interest in that, check it out. We also, as I mentioned way earlier, have an advocacy blog that addresses issues around access and quality of care for mental health, particularly for mood disorders. We write it and we bring in voices from people living with depression or bipolar disorder, their families, clinicians, researchers, policymakers, advocates. We're actually just going into a series now that is about shared decision making so that patients and families can better advocate for the care that works for them. And we're going to be doing more about patient-centered outcomes. So again, defining your own wellness goals and then working with your family and your clinician to move toward achieving those goals. We cannot do these programs without support that we get. I mean, first of all, Marianne, thank you so much. You did an amazing job with this material, and it was a pleasure to listen to for me. I hope for our audience as well. We also receive funding from the Massachusetts Department of Public Health Suicide Prevention Program and the Takeda-Lundbeck Alliance. And thank you all for tuning in because it is your time and you have many things that are competing for that. So we appreciate you taking the time. We hope that we are able to address some of your concerns and enlighten you a bit about things that you can look for in yourself and others. But if you are so inclined to, appreciate through a donation, we would very much like that. So anytime. So if you don't have time to stay for the question and answer, then just go ahead to the survey. The URL is on the screen. I believe it's also on our educational webinars page. But let's get to some of those questions and answers. My fault. Okay. So I really appreciated your reference to Viktor Frankl about the time between stimulus and response, and it really correlates with a couple of the questions that we got. One asks how to remain calm when she gets upsetting information. One says, if you're in a meeting or a conversation and a colleague says something that triggers you, what do you do? How do you give yourself the chance to work through some anxiety that might provoke?
Yeah, so you're right. That little tiny little space we create for ourselves, most times we don't really know that's there. So I think just knowing that when you take a deep breath and detach from the drama and of the moment, you're offended, you're triggered. We all get like that. I mean, you turn on the TV, you turn on Facebook these days, it's easy to get triggered. and coworkers can do it too. And the important thing is to keep in your mind to never say anything until you've taken a deep breath. And that way, what comes out will be a little better thought out. It'll be a little better, it'll come out kinder. It'll come out more effective. That when we react to stuff, our answer is not reactive because it's emotion-based. But if we take that second to give ourselves some, counting to 10 time, then we can come up and we can understand that person has a right to their opinion. That person has a right to their whatever it is that they triggered you with. But you also have just as much right to be heard, to have an opinion, and your opinion is just as valid as theirs. Not more so and not less so, but the same. Does that help?
Yes, it does. And I also, one of the things that we sometimes advise people is to say, I can't talk with you about that right now. Give me some time, and I will be happy to get back to you. And you can name a time, or you can say when might be convenient for you. Just, you have to set your own limits about what you can accomplish in that particular moment. So,
and even saying, give me 10 minutes to think that through.
Exactly.
And then you can walk out of the room and walk around and get rid of some of that stress while you're walking around the block or something.
Great.
Give some time.
So a lot of people ask questions about dealing with coworkers, and I have to tell you that looking through these questions, the kinds of words that were used to describe coworkers were rude, mean, abusive, toxic, negative, and they yell. What are some ways to cope with the stress that your coworkers generate in you? What are ways to deal with them when they're being mean? How do you manage toxic individuals?
Wow, that's a whole lot rolled up into one. But the important part, this is why some of those practices, the mindfulness-based practices that we were talking about in the seminar, are so important. That if you can develop a mindful approach to life by starting your day with meditation. I know we all don't have 30 minutes twice a day, but if you can begin to just take some time to connect whatever your faith base allows you to, whether it's the universe or whether it's God or whether it's nature, but take a few minutes to breathe and understand that you are not alone. You are connected to something bigger than yourself. And the habit that establishes where your roots go deep into something bigger than you, it enables you, like an oak tree, to become much bigger, much stronger within your own mind and much more able to withstand the winds of circumstance and crazy coworkers and rude people, because you begin to understand that you're okay the way you are. And everybody, while we're all connected on some level, everybody has their own human manifestation of personality. And everybody is on their own growth pathway. And if you can begin to see that you're okay, just because that's their anger, that's not your anger, so you don't have to react to it. You don't have to defend against it. You don't even have to prove you're right, because if you're right, you don't have to prove that. You just are. And so we become much less reactive to the stimulus of other people when we are well-grounded. And that's one of the biggest benefits, I think, of establishing a meditation practice and a gratitude practice. So at the moment, when somebody's yelling at you or being rude, that's their problem. That is their problem if they are rude. It doesn't really have to affect you. You don't have to react to it. Does that make sense?
It does. It's easier to say than do. But I think it's the kind of thing that if you practice, then you're able to do it more.
Well, I do think, because, you know, they're simple concepts, but they're not easy to do, because you have to remember every time you get triggered that that's not about you. And I was just talking to somebody about the 4 agreements where, what was that one agreement that's, that little book called The 4 Agreements, and it's not, usually when people offend you, it's not about you, it's about them. It's about their thought processes, it's about their dysfunction, it's about their journey, not yours. And when it's not about yours, you don't have to react against it.
Early on in the webinar, you had said that it's your employer's obligation to create an environment that is suitable, I guess. But they don't always do that, and they don't always know how to do that.
Yeah.
So how can people, well, okay, let's say someone is listening and they're an employer. What kind of steps would you suggest they take to improve the environment in their workplace? Yeah.
Well, I know a lot of that has to do with this big divide very often between management and staff. There's sort of, I know staff often feels very curious and uncomfortable about things that are going on and they're not being communicated with. And so I think one of the first things that I would encourage employers to do is to create really good communication with their staff on a regular basis. What's going on in the office, any changes that are taking place. I would encourage positive interactions with people. You know, if you have a newsletter of sorts or something like that, recognition of employees, because I know that's a large portion of dissatisfaction. Employees are very often think that they're not even recognized. Nobody appreciates what they do. I had somebody say to me, someone that works for me came over and said, you know, you're the only one that has ever said to me, you know, I appreciate you. And people, many bosses don't really realize how important it is to recognize when somebody's done something well. And, you know, it doesn't always have to be money. It can just be hey, our employee of the week is so-and-so. They did this, they did that. You know, everybody give them a pat on the back when they walk by. Very important to communicate right and recognize people for work well done. I think those 2 things go a long way.
And I agree with that. I know for some people getting the prime parking spot is a great recognition.
Well, there you go. Yeah, see, sometimes it doesn't take a whole lot, does it?
Exactly. I also wanted to add that there are a variety of programs that are available, including the Coping with Stress program that we offer, that can help create environments in workplaces where employees are given the space to recognize their symptoms, to find ways to better deal with their stress. And just the fact that an employer will bring a program like this in shows some level of recognition that people need to take care of their mental health.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've seen companies that really, really appreciate anybody coming in and just talking about this kind of stuff once in a while, maybe a staff meeting even once a month. And, you know, it doesn't identify anybody as being the problem, but it helps bring the issue to the forefront. I think that's important.
I agree. So it was interesting. Someone asked about whether nonprofit organizations differ from for-profits, with the sense that wages are often low and there's a lot of, you know, the work is very hard and often it's very interpersonal with people who are less fortunate or people who are struggling. but this person who wrote in said that, there are constant power plays among the women. There's gossip and finger pointing. What's causing it? How do we address and mitigate? And it's interesting to me because in my career, I have worked in nonprofits for my whole career. And I find that when you can really unite around the mission, then a lot of the other stuff can just sort of fall into place. If you are able to help someone if you have any flexibility to like lend a hand some days and be helped on other days, that can help. And sometimes it's the way people are and they're struggling with their issues, and maybe that's the time when you try to offer a little compassion, and that way it's something that you feel good about for yourself, and maybe it's something that helps them.
Yeah. And so important for the leadership to, yes, people get gossipy and people get backbiting and people get worn out and people, that's not my job, that kind of thing. But like you were saying, if you're just flexible and you set the example that we stay focused on the mission and that we don't engage in the gossip and the backbiting, and we clean the toilets and we send the bills and we do whatever it is we need to do to get the job done, because very often at a nonprofit people are not there to make the money. They're there out of the goodness of their heart, and very often volunteers. So really, really important for the leadership to show a good example.
An area that a lot of people had issues with was sort of the excessive demands of work and the, balancing demands of work and family, and, just having too much on your plate. How can you prioritize things when everything is a priority, and how can you get away from feeling overloaded, even though, like, by objective measures you are?
That's so funny, because I was just thinking of a speaker we had one time for our Women's Business Council meeting, and somebody's saying, so what is work-life balance? And she goes, there is none. And this woman was a reporter on the front lines. I think she lived in Gaza most of the time, and the point is, and she had little kids while she was doing it, and the point is, you just have to maintain, do what needs to be done, the next thing that needs to be done, and delegate what you don't have to do anything. This is an important, whether it's paying somebody to have your house cleaned, or paying somebody to pick up your kids, or having somebody else mow your lawn, whatever you can delegate. That's important. I think a lot of people don't like to do that, or don't think they can afford to do that. But your time is worth a lot, and you might have a few things that you have to do on your own, but delegating is an important part. And then it's more of a juggling act than a balancing act. You have to keep a lot of plates in the air at the same time, and if you just let yourself be flexible and do what you have to do when it has to be done, and, sometimes things just don't get done. Just make sure your kids get fed. That's important.
It also helps to walk the dog, I think.
Right. They have to.
and that's actually good for you, too.
That's right. That creates its own problems if you don't do that.
But I mean, in the sense of getting out and getting exercise and
exactly.
Getting away from people, and all of those things can be useful.
Kills a few birds with one stone.
Exactly. Well, when everything's a priority,
yep,
you try and consolidate. Someone asked about having empathy exhaustion, that they give and give and give, and they've sort of reached the end of feeling like they can do that. So I guess they need replenishing in some way.
They do. That's where some of the stuff on self-care is so important. We think we're being selfish if we put up boundaries that we were talking about. And And I think you and I had been talking about that too. It's just such an important thing to take care of yourself first. That's why they say put on your own oxygen mask first before you help the person next to you. So it is healthy for you to exercise and eat a healthy diet and to tell this person that you don't have time to talk right now because you're doing this, and keeping your boundaries well. And then I think I mentioned this in this webinar, that I'm a strong proponent of a mental health day, that you just take the day off, that you go walk in the woods if you have to, that you take a few days off if you need to, because your depletion doesn't help anybody, and it's not a selfish thing. We have to get over that. It's selfish to take care of me. It's not. And so if you can do healthy things every day, do as much as you can for yourself. Treat yourself good. Nobody's going to treat you as good as you can treat yourself.
I have one that is easy. Is it normal to have periods of depression that last for months at a time?
Well, there's a lot of people that have a clinical depression, which is what we were talking about, which is you take that losing your interest in everything, and feeling guilty and not having the energy. And when you have long periods of depression, you need to get help. And I was listening to a webinar just the other night. Actually, my stepson was the speaker, because he also struggles with depression sometimes, and he's a pastor of a church. So then you feel guilty because you're a pastor and you shouldn't have depression. But his message to everyone is, when he gets back into that low feeling state, he calls back his therapist, he gets his medication adjusted, and he said sometimes you just have to do that for you, or you can't take care of anyone else. So while it might be something that happens to you every now and then, make sure you notice the first sign of slipping down into the depths again, and go back and see your therapist again. I think that's vital. Self-care in there is vital.
Yes, and I guess that also ties in with that people expressed concerns about noticing issues with other people, how to talk with them about their concerns, how to offer advice without sounding insensitive, work with people who just won't admit that, in fact, they're stressed and perhaps on the edge of depression. So in terms of broaching the subject with someone for whom you are concerned, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we shouldn't be shy about that, or we shouldn't think it's none of our business. That people generally appreciate if somebody shows concern, and you do it one-on-one. You don't do it in front of a crowd. It's like, gosh, Joe, you're acting like such a jerk. What's wrong with you? That's not a really effective approach. You might get Joe off in the coffee room and say, hey, Joe, I noticed you've been kind of stressed lately. You want to go out for a cup of coffee and, share what's on your mind? And if they say no, that's okay, because that's their choice, but at least they know you are there. And you can always say to somebody, if you ever need to talk, I'm here. And sometimes they're just not ready when they're caught off guard. But the fact that you show an interest, I think, is so important and really appreciated, whether or not they act appreciative at the moment or not. And especially that question about suicide. Are you thinking of hurting yourself? That one needs to be asked. And if you are, you can even give that person, I know unsolicited advice is not welcome, but here's the name of a therapist I think you should call, or you can call.
And people used to think that if you asked someone about suicide, that you were putting the idea in their head, and that's
right.
been proven to be incorrect. And
right.
that one of the most effective things is to say, are you thinking of killing yourself? Are you thinking of hurting yourself? And that has been shown to be sort of a relief that they have a chance to talk about it instead of acting on it.
Right, absolutely. And if they're not, the response I usually get is, oh, no, 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 nothing like that. You know, and then I'm glad I've asked. You know, if they're not thinking about it, they're not going to say, now that you brought it up, you know, people don't generally respond like that. I think that's very wise, Susan. I think that's very true. That's not going to put the idea in their mind.
So thank you. So we had a slide about creating good work habits, and it says things about not working overtime, leaving work at work, not working during time off. And there were a large number of questions that were about how do I not take my stress from work home? How do I not what can I do to not bring that home with me? How can I change my brain to not be thinking about work?
Well, you know, sometimes we think our brain runs us, but the fact is we have a choice of what we think. What do we have, 60,000 thoughts a day? We have a choice which ones we're going to focus on. And so your brain is spinning 100 miles an hour. There's all kinds of projects perhaps you have to do at work and so many problems and financial issues you have to deal with and so forth. But when you take that transition time between work and home to just tell yourself, you can sometimes make a list before you leave the office. Here's the first 3 things I'm going to do in the morning, and leave it on your desk so you know it's going to be taken care of first thing in the morning, and nothing can be done about it overnight while everybody's not there, unless you're in an international company, and then that gets crazy. But so the important thing is to find ways to make a plan to do whatever you have to do the next day, and then use that transition time in the car, listening to music, listening to a book on tape or something that's going to divert your mind into another direction, so that it's almost like you take a cloak of a heavy weight off. This is my cloak of worry that I wear at work, and I'm going to leave it here at work, and I'm going to go home, and I'm going to look my spouse in the eye, and I'm going to pat my kids on the head and wrestle on the floor with them, and that's my job when I get home. And be totally present in whatever moment you're doing. That's where that mindfulness-based stress reduction practicing stuff is really, really important, to immerse yourself in the thing at hand at the moment, whether it's playing with your kids, paying the bills, talking to your spouse, or doing your work at work. Everything has a time and a place, and you get to choose how much energy you're going to give it when there's not a thing in the world you can do about it. Okay. Sounds easy again, takes practice.
No, it's easy, I'm sure. I'm just going to make a couple of comments here that some people submitted some questions that are actually legal in nature. And for those people, I would say find out if the Americans with Disabilities Act applies to your workplace. Find out if there are state laws that would govern, and often there are state agencies that can provide advice on dealing with employers who are not respecting someone's need for accommodations. I would also just point out that on the careforyourmind.org there is a post by Dr. Mark Siegert that specifically addresses about getting accommodations at work. So take a peek at that. Someone asked if we have resources that help people address mental or financial crises. If someone is in a true crisis, then calling the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is the answer, 800-273-8255. But many states have 211, which is a helpline of sorts, and they often have a variety of departments that can provide referrals and help people to get help. And I also wanted to remind people that the Help Someone tab on the familyware.org has a lot of information about talking with someone about whom you have concerns. There was a question about Families for Depression advocacy, and we use our Care for Your Mind blog to bring up a lot of discussion about access and quality. And we're working toward being a real meeting point for a variety of interests to pursue agenda items that we agree on in terms of improving our mental health care system. Here's the last one that we have time for, so I apologize that we didn't get to everything, but how do you deal with the loss of privacy and the loss of sort of meditative time, perhaps, when your workplace is no longer offices, but instead it's pods or cubicles?
Well, there's always the bathroom.
Agreed.
And I often say to people, because it does seem like sometimes it's just you just can't get your space. And so sometimes I'll even encourage people to, if you need your space, nobody can tell you can't go to the bathroom. And so if you need to take a walk, you need to clear your head, you need to take some deep breaths, it's a great idea to do that, to go to the restaurant room and just get your private space there. And the other thing is you can step outside if possible at lunch, maybe even eat your lunch outside. And some offices, and sometimes I recommend employers, they create a room, if there is an extra room of sorts, kind of like a little quiet room, a meditation room, where people can go and just be away from the noise, whether it's to read a book, whether it's to take some deep breaths, whether it's to meditate, whether it's just to be for a few minutes, because I do think human beings need time by themselves sometimes.
Agreed. Marianne Clyde, this has been a real delight, and I feel like we've gotten a whole lot of information out there. There's always more that we can provide, so we are looking for people to give us feedback. The evaluation should pop up for you. If it's not there, then by all means go to familyware.org/trainings. You all have made a commitment to yourself about reducing your stress. Put it on the evaluation and see how you do. We will follow up. And if you feel like you need to, take the depression test and then take your results to your provider. You can always start with your primary care provider. And visit our website. We have all kinds of information and resources and tools. So please take advantage of all that. Thank you all so much for being with us. Thank you again, Marianne.
Thank you.
And I hope everyone has a very pleasant rest of their day.